So I've been saying this a lot. We owe duties. We owe loyalties. We owe very important things to clients, not to customers. So there is a huge differentiation, and it is a highly testable differentiation between clients and customers. Clients are the people we are loyal to. They're looking out for them. Think about that attorney relationship, right? God knows. Whether you think O.J. Simpson did it or not, there's a lot of people who think he did. But his attorney was daggum good. And he got him off. So you owe your person a lot of things. Even if you may not like it sometimes. Customers don't get that kind of treatment. If you're silly enough to go it alone, or if you're not our person, but you have somebody else, right? We don't owe you certain things. Only your principal or only your agent owes you things. So here's what we say. We owe our principals, our clients, old car. Old car. Not a literal old car, but the acronym old car. So we owe them obedience, loyalty, disclosure, confidentiality, accounting, and reasonable skill. Now, if I say obedience, the first thing you probably think of is dog training, right? But what else do you think of, right? What does obedience mean to you? What do you think I mean when I say obedience?
Since you're working for them, like if they want to list their house at their price, you have to be obedient to it.
I like that, yeah.
Your professional opinion.
Mm-hmm. Folks, go ahead.
Not combating their opinion and like what they want to do. You just gotta kind of agree.
Yeah. When we're dealing with obedience, it kind of is like dog training, right? Like if they say jump, we say how high. Okay? Let me translate this in the most testable way, though. You have to follow their lawful, willful instructions. Their lawful, willful instructions. And so let's go back to what Claire said. I apologize. Like my mustache is going nuts, and so it keeps tickling my nose. Let's go back to what Claire said. If you had a seller, you as a licensee, as a broker, are going to do something called a comparative market analysis, a CMA, which is where we look at comps and we help determine a probable sales price. That's going to come way down the road. I'm just introducing these mini topics, okay? And let's say that you had a seller and you do this CMA for them, and you come up with a reasonable sales price for their property of, $400,000. You say, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, your home probably should sell between $390,000 and $410,000, right? Like that's a given range. And the seller says this number right here. $390,000 and $410,000. Good, great. That sounds great. Listen, I want to list it at $1 million though. And you as agent, you're going to be like, yeah, sorry, I thought you said $1 million. You did. You said $1 million. Folks, let me ask you this. Are you going to list their house for $1 million?
Yep.
Yes, because they still pay me for the assistance.
Oh, there you go. It is not illegal. So if they ask you to do something that's illegal, we're not going to do it. But there's nothing illegal about overlisting a house. It's a silly thing to do, but it's not illegal. So we have to follow their lawful, willful instructions. If we list it for $1 million, though, and they then turn around and say, listen, I want you to go hold a gun to somebody's head and you make them pay me $1 million. Do you have to do that? No. I was like, you know what I tell them? I say, you know what? I'm too pretty for jail. I'm not going to jail for you. Okay? I'd be somebody's boyfriend real quick. People got to type in jail. All right? And I'm kind of clumsy and I might drop the soap and I can't live a life like that. You know what I'm saying? Can't be doing that kind of stuff. So I'm a pass. Not doing it. Have to follow their lawful, willful instructions. Let me give you a lesser, more realistic example aside the gun thing. We're going to talk about a concept here in a little bit called material fact. So I'm going to go ahead and give you this mini lesson on material fact. A material fact is anything that, if known, might change the outlook of a party completing a real estate transaction. And so things like a leaky roof would be a material fact, or some foundation issues would be a material fact, right? I'm going to give you some more examples of material facts down the road. Well, in North Carolina, we have rules that dictate that a broker, a licensee, always has to disclose material facts. You ready for this? To everybody. Not customers, not clients, both. It's not either or. We have to disclose material facts to all parties. So when I say that we don't owe customers much, I still mean it. The only thing that we owe customers, honesty, fairness, and disclosure of material facts, because we owe those material facts to all people. And so let me just give you an example of this obedience thing, and when you would not have to follow their lawful or their unlawful instructions. If you list a home, even listed at an appropriate price, and the seller says, well, hey, my roof leaks. And I don't want to just tell anybody. You can't abide by that, because that would break license law. We only abide by lawful, willful instructions. But if they say jump, we say how high. They're the boss. Okay, that's obedience. Loyalty, they're our person. We're looking out for them and them alone. Disclosure is disclosure of all things that would be important to a client in a transaction. Let me give you an example. If you are a listing agent, meaning you work for a seller, and you've listed their beautiful home, and they get 100 showings, and you get emails from 50 agents saying, I'm going to send you an offer. And one offer comes in. Well, we have rules that state you have to deliver all offers. So once you deliver that first offer, do you think you probably need to tell your seller about the other 50 potential offers that may come in?
Yes.
Yeah. You're looking out for them. You've got to tell them anything that they need to know that would be useful information. A potential 50 offers is useful information. So when we say disclosure, we mean of all things. Anything and everything that could be important to them. I'm going to go ahead and make another statement, and this is where I told you that when I tell you we owe customers honesty and fairness, it's almost laughable, and here's why. If you're not our person, our job is to take you to the cleaners. Let me explain. We have an agency disclosure that is required that we're going to talk about. And we have to tell people whom we're representing, and we have to tell them that we will take them to the cleaners if they're not our person. That is a requirement. Think of it like the Miranda rights. Every single one of us has seen a cop show, right? The Miranda rights is when they arrest somebody. And they say, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. We do that too in real estate. It's called the agency disclosure. We basically say this. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a real estate transaction. If you're not our person, we are going to use and abuse you if you let us. We had to draw a line in the sand so nobody was confused about who they represent. It's all in. If you're representing the seller, screw the buyer. If you're representing the buyer, screw the seller, right? Go for blood. It gets nasty up in here, right? It's the wild, wild west of real estate, right? We're just, right, whatever you want. And let me explain. On that agency disclosure, it says exactly what I just said, and here's why. Because that disclosure also goes back to special things for your client. And here's a statement I need you to think about. We are obligated to disclose customer confidential information to our client. Meaning, if we talk to a customer and tell them, don't tell me your secrets, but they're stupid enough to still tell us their secrets, we have to tell our clients and take them to the cleaners. That's why I told you it's a lot like the Miranda rights. Because if they don't heed our warning and tell us stuff anyway, we're going to use it against them. Now, if you think about the confidentiality piece, we would never tell our clients' secrets to anyone. But we would absolutely tell customer secrets to our clients. That makes sense? Accounting, pretty straightforward. Have to account for all funds, properly, store documents and things of that nature. And then one of my personal favorites is reasonable skill. Means don't be an idiot. You got to know what you're doing, right? If they hired you as the professional, you've got to know how to actually be the professional. You got to know which forms to use, how to properly fill them out, how to negotiate transactions, so on and so forth. So these are the things we owe to our clients. Excuse me. We never owe any of these things to customers. Customers get honesty, fairness, and disclosure material facts. And only because everybody gets disclosure material facts. So clients owed old car. Customers, honesty, fairness, and disclosure material facts. And this is where, sometimes Travis may not give all the information. He probably wouldn't have started talking about material facts yet. I went ahead and gave you that mini lesson because I wanted you to have the whole truth about it beforehand. That's what we mean by the required information. So all of these things are in the slides. I just explained them to you. Obedience. Follow their lawful, willful instructions. They are the boss. If it doesn't break the law, we got to do it. Even if we don't think it's a good idea, right? That listing a house for $1 million, not a good idea. But if they make us do it. Now, from the real world, let me explain what that would look like for me. If my client insisted on $1 million, I'd say something like this. Hey, listen, Slick. I'll list it for $1 million, but how about this? For every week it doesn't sell, we're going to drop it by $100,000 until we get back to reality. All right? That's what we're going to do. And if they agree, then we're good. But understand, if they don't agree, then you may not elect to work with these people, right? Because we got to be on the same page. They're the boss. So if they come to, let's go back to those material facts. Don't tell anybody my roof leaks. And you say, well, listen, I have to. I'm legally obligated to disclose this material fact now that I know it. And they are insistent. Best thing to do is just choose not to work with them. Say, well, I'm sorry, then I can't assist you.
So, Seth, can we back out at any point of time from that client?
No, not necessarily. But under certain circumstances, yes. So that's an advanced concept. So what Sandeep is asking is, can we back out at any time, when we're working with clients? Well, you have to understand that the way that we create these relationships that we're talking about, these agency relationships, is with what we call an agency agreement. It's a type of contract. An agency contract, agency agreement. And just like any contract, it's binding on the parties. So you can't just get out of it just because you want to, and they can't just get out of it because they want to. But when we get into contract law and the way that these things are interpreted, you can get out of it because of somebody's what we call breach. A breach is somebody failing to fulfill their promises. And so if a seller is in breach or buyer is in breach, we could use that as an opportunity to get rid of them and fire them in the contract. And then conversely, they could do the same to us. They can't just get rid of us, but if they find that we're not fulfilling our obligations, then if we're in breach, they could potentially get out of their contract with us as well. Excuse me. Mm-hmm. So I want to talk about this little interesting tidbit right here, because I told you sometimes things show up in our slides that are really testable in different areas. And here's an example. It says, licensees cannot ever disclose what terms are contained in a buyer's offer to other, and a buyer's offer to other buyers who are interested in the same property unless the licensee has the written permission of the first buyer to do so. So what that is actually referring to is what we would call a license law and a commission rule. And so that is its own testable category. Remember, I showed you license law and commission rules have 10 questions on the North Carolina portion of the test. And so what we say is that we cannot disclose material terms of an offer without permission of the offeror. Do you think that ever happens? Not really. And let me explain this to you. If you were a listing agent and you received an offer for $200,000, an offer for $205,000, and an offer for $210,000, but you thought that these two people would come up, and you had this idea to tell them that you had an offer for $210 to see if they'd beat it, you would have to call this person or their agent and say, hey, listen, you're currently the best offer, but I'm trying to screw you and everybody else and make more money. Would you give me permission to tell everybody what you offered? Hello? Hello? Must have got disconnected. Call them back, right? They're going to hang up on you. Ain't nobody going to give you permission to screw them. But please be aware on the test, though, if we ask you a question about whether it's legal to do this, it is. If you have permission of the offeror, this is why we don't deal in absolutes. To say that it's never legal to disclose material terms of an offer is not a true statement. It would be legal with permission of the offeror. There's that or word. The person who gave you the offer. If you had permission of the offeror, you could disclose the terms of their offer. It just hardly ever happens. So if a seller ordered you to tell these two people what the highest offer was, that's an unlawful instruction. We would not have to follow that. We would tell them, I'm sorry, I can't. That'd be a violation of license on commission rule. This down here says if disclosure of an item is required by law, the client cannot order their agent to keep it a secret. That's talking about material facts again. It's just presumably you don't know what material facts are yet. I just gave you a mini lesson on it. Loyalty, right? They're our person, looking out for their best interest, always, always. Let me give you an example of loyalty to the umpteenth degree. Their interests come before our own. I keep saying that. Folks, one of the biggest concerns that most new licensees, or new students, should I say, in pre-licensing have, is about getting paid, right? You're always so interested. Well, how do you get paid? Who's paying you? Who's this? Who's that? You gotta toss that out, at least for the sake of this class. And the reason is, there's a lot of questions that we're not going to tell you who's paying you, and it doesn't matter. Okay, I do understand in the real world you get paid, but let me give you kind of 2 points of clarity here. We are a very unique industry where payment-wise, we typically are paid by the opposite team. Think back to the story time I gave you. The listing agents are the ones that are charging the sellers money. And then when we started allowing people to show the homes, we started sharing that commission with them because they were doing half the work, and so we gave them half the commission. So it's continued that way all this time. Most often, the seller is paying both their agent and the buyer's agent, which is crazy because if you think about any other industry, that doesn't make any sense, right? Hate to be the guy that always goes to football analogies, but I mean, if the Panthers and the Falcons were playing, it would make no sense for the Panthers to be paying the Falcons quarterback. But that's how we do it. The opposite team pays you to play against them. So don't worry too much about money because money is almost always not going to be what the question's about. And so let me take this a step further with this loyalty piece, okay? Who's paying you doesn't determine loyalties. Agency agreements determine loyalties. And when we're dealing with being paid, I want you to understand how important this fiduciary duties and these loyalties are. If you're a buyer's agent, who do you owe old car to? Who do you have a fiduciary relationship with?
Buyer.
The buyer. And so if a buyer wants to see a home that's offering you $10,000 in commission, another home that's offering you $7,000 in commission, and another home that's offering you $1 in commission, do you think you get to pick and choose which ones you show them?
No, you show which one they want to see.
That's exactly right. Folks, you owe them loyalty. Their needs come before your own. So you would have to show them all of those homes. That is what loyalty means. Now, here's where I'll let you rest easy a little bit because some of you are like, $1? Right? You ever remember Chappelle's show, right? $1? What am I going to do with $1? I got kids to feed. That's for real, right? If you remember Chappelle's show, that was the best. Loved it. By the way, I have way too many like Dave Chappelle references in this class, especially for how long ago that went off the air. I can't explain it. I don't want to talk about it. Anyway, I digress. Here's the thing though. When we get into the agency agreements and the contracts, you do stipulate what you expect to make on them. So understand that while you can't elect to not take them there, what the buyer agency contract says is that if you're not being offered what we agreed upon by the seller or the listing agent, then we may look at the buyer to make it up. So you would actually have the conversation like, well, hey, I'm happy to show you all three. Listen, just to let you know, this one's only offering $1 in compensation, and we agreed that I'd make $10,000 on the buyer agency agreement. So please understand that, they won't come up on it. You may just have to pay me the other $9,999. And you know what most buyers are going to say to that, right? I didn't like that house that much anyway. Honestly, it was just a tacky house. Let's just drop that one off. We can just go see the other two. I don't even know how that got on that list. Just take it off, right? And if that's their choice, that's fine. But understand that your loyalty says, regardless, you have to take them, right? Their interests come before your own. Disclosure of information. I told you, we got to tell them everything and anything that we think they need to know, especially to the extent of customers, right? If we find out customer confidential information, we have to disclose it to our clients. Excuse me. If we knew that a customer would pay more, we got to tell our client. If we knew that there was 14 people thinking about putting an offer in, we got to tell our client. If we knew that this was happening, that was happening, all right? Got to tell our client, okay? Disclosure of any and all things that can make their decision or be used in decision making for their whatever it was, right? Whether they're a buyer or seller. Got to tell them all of the things we know. So here's just where it goes into that customer confidential information being disclosed to our clients. So we have to present them with all offers. We have to identity of the potential buyers, any relationship brokers have to third parties, right? Any information. Folks, let me give you another example of this. If you had another client or a buyer that was interested in the property and you were related to them, you'd need to tell your client that, right? Because that'd be important information. And we'll get into stuff like that later, but anything and everything that could make their decision or could be used in making a decision. If we know it, we have to tell them.
So if you're representing both a buyer and a seller at the same time, and your buyer is interested in your seller's house and they go under contract, how would you would know everything on each side? So with that dual agency, how would you not disclose everything to them?
Remember a few slides ago when I told you dual agency, even though we say you have loyalties to both, works a lot like transactional brokerage, where you really can't help either party. Because arguably, if you help the buyer, you hurt the seller. If you help the seller, you hurt the buyer.
But it's all legal.
It's legal.
Okay.
Yeah. The best way to think about dual agency in and of itself is you're bound and gagged. You can't say nothing about nothing to nobody, except for material facts. Because you always owe everybody material facts. But yes, you would know what the buyer would be willing to pay. You know what the seller would be willing to take. But you wouldn't be able to tell that to anybody. Because now we're not dealing with clients versus customers. We're dealing with clients and clients. That's right. So this is that last note about disclosure. It says this is why it's so important that people never tell real estate agents, brokers, or firms information they know before they know who the agent is working for. And that's why I told you we have an agency disclosure that warns them of this. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a real estate transaction. We've got to tell the consumers that, the public that, before we can go on about our way and do things the way that we're supposed to do them. Okay? We will be required to use information that we find out about you if you are not our client. So hush your mouth, right? Don't tell us nothing.
So one question.
Yeah.
If the customer told me like how much is gonna offer, and I can tell my client how much is trying to offer the other customer, so he can buy it more or something. Is that legal or illegal?
You're talking about disclosing the terms of one customer to another customer?
Yeah.
No, because that goes back to you cannot disclose material terms of an offer without permission of an offeror. Yet again, that rule has nothing to do with representation.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, we just don't. That's called shopping offers. If you're trying to bid people against each other in North Carolina, it's called shopping offers. That's illegal in North Carolina. Some states it's legal. It's not legal in North Carolina. You can never disclose material terms of an offer without permission of an offeror. But for instance, you know, if excuse me, if you're a listing, my goodness, I hope this goes away soon. Andres, if you're a listing agent working for a seller, and you get, you know, 2 customers, unrepresented buyers call you, and one, you know, after you disclose how agency works, one sends an offer or has you write up an offer for $200,000, but tells you that they'd go up to $210,000. You got to tell your seller that this person would go up to $210,000. If this one sent an offer for $210,000, and you know they said they'd go up to, you know, $250,000, you got to tell your seller they'd go up to $250,000. So you would have to disclose customer confidential information to your seller, but you couldn't disclose this offer to this one without permission of the offeror, because remember that rule has nothing to do with representation. It's just cannot disclose material terms of an offer without permission of the offeror, the person whose offer it is.
Oh, okay. Now I understand. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So confidentiality, we got to keep our clients' secrets, okay? Folks, there are times where we learn some crazy stuff about our people. Let me take it on a lesser level, and then I'll take it on a crazy level. If we know that our seller would be ecstatic with $375,000, but we've agreed to list their house at $400,000, we're not going to tell the world that they'd accept $375,000, because that would be breaching our fiduciary duties of confidentiality. Doesn't matter what the circumstances are. Unless you have permission from your seller to disclose it, you can't do it. So let me give you an example of when you'd be in breach of your fiduciary duties. Let's say you got a seller. This is at $400,000, but they know that you know that they would take $375,000, and that thing has been on the market for 60 days, and ain't nobody put an offer in yet. So after 60 days, and having to hear those sellers nag you, right? Somebody calls you up and says, "Hey, just showed your property. I think my buyer's going to be putting in an offer. Is there anything your sellers are looking for that'd be more favorable?" And you do this number right here. "No, for the love of God, just put in an offer. Listen, it's listed at $400,000. These people are the bane of my existence. It's been on the market for so long. Just $375,000. They'll take it. Put it at $375,000. I just got to get them under contract. I'm losing my mind. These people are the worst." Folks, you just breached your fiduciary duty. You just went against your client's needs, wants, and desires, their best wishes, and what you promised to do in that fiduciary relationship, okay? You've got to keep their secret secret. Same thing, too. If we know they're going through the world's nastiest divorce because homeboy cheated on his wife with his secretary and she's trying to murder him every day, poisoning his soup, and they need to sell the house, or this guy's going to end up in the backyard in a ditch, right? And they take any offer that's reasonable. We're not going to tell the public that, right? We keep their secret secret. Unless otherwise required by law, material facts, right? Have to disclose those. Accounting, I told you, deals with handling money. We're going to talk about a couple different types of money that we use a lot in real estate brokerage, and that is due diligence money and earnest money. Earnest money is a type of trust money that goes in what we call a custodial account. So a trust account or escrow account is what it's called. And when monies is exchanging hands, we need to make sure that we properly document it. We need to keep track of their documents, have adequate files, safeguard all their stuff, right? That's what that accounting means. Okay, we need to make sure that their money is protected and it's, handled appropriately.
I have one quick question.
Yeah, for sure.
So if you have a buyer's agent call you and say, what are your sellers looking for? That'll make the offer stronger. Your sellers have to tell you, like, you're allowed to say this, or that would be confidentiality, or is it?
No, you're exactly right. You'd be allowed to say that because the biggest thing is if you don't have their permission, don't say their secrets. But if you have their permission, go nuts, right? If the sellers tell you, it's okay for you to tell them it'd be okay for $375. You have permission. You're not breaching their, confidentiality. If they say that we want a 30-day close and $10,000 in due diligence and what's favorable to them, and that's part of your plan, go nuts, right? You can tell them that. It's just if you know their secrets and you don't have their permission to tell them, that would be an issue, right? Yeah. So trust accounts are another pretty testable concept, but we're not there yet. So this is just a very initial introduction to trust accounts. There's a lot of questions on the license on commission rules section for trust accounts and handling and everything like that. Understand that not every real estate broker needs a trust account. A trust account is where we handle other people's money. Tenant security deposits would be trust account items. Earnest money would be trust account items. But if we're not handling tenant security deposits and all we're handling is earnest monies, sometimes we have the attorney who's handling the closing hold that in their trust account. So it's not a requirement for a firm to have a trust account. But there are certain rules and regulations when a firm does have one. And we'll talk about that some more down the road. The general rule of thumb is when we touch any money that is belonging to others, it has to go into our trust account first and clear, and then we could disperse it to somebody else. But there's exceptions to that rule with due diligence and earnest money that we'll talk about down the road. So here is two big pieces of terminology. And like I said, this is very early on, very advanced, but I'll go ahead and tell them to you in regard to trust accounts. The two most illegal, most prohibited things with trust accounts is what we call conversion and commingling. Trust accounts, also called escrow accounts, are where we hold other people's money, not our own. And so commingling would be mixing your own money with other people's money. It's called commingling. It is illegal. The general rule of thumb is you can't have more than $100 worth of your own money in a trust account. And the only reason you can have $100 is for service fees and things of that nature that the banks may charge. Conversion is when you use somebody else's money to pay for something for yourself. Because these are trust monies, these are immediately available funds that you have to give back at the drop of a hat. So we're not allowed to touch them. They're just supposed to sit there. So if you were to cut a check from your trust account to pay your firm's light bill, that'd be conversion. You converted other people's money and treated it as your own. That's illegal. Big trouble. Conversion and commingling. Bad things. We'll talk more about them later too. So then the last piece of that old car of the R, remember, was reasonable skill. Also, sometimes we just say reasonable skill, care, and diligence. Folks, you've got to know what you're doing. One of you mentioned earlier that going into something full-time, going into real estate brokerage full-time, probably going to make you more hireable, and I'd argue you're absolutely correct. You can do this part-time, but people want you to know what you're doing. People want you to be dedicated. People want you to be available to them. And I'll put it this way. I don't want a part-time heart surgeon. I also don't want the heart surgeon that got D's in medical school. You know what I'm saying? You want the best of the best. It's no different with somebody which you're investing hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. I want the best of the best. If you get your license and never learn anything and just goof around and just accidentally get a little bit of business, but you suck at what you're doing, it's going to be a very short-lived career. You've got to learn what you're doing. You've got to know how to protect your client. The question you have to ask yourself is, would I hire me to buy a house? And the answer is no. You got some work to do, slick. All right? Get better. You got to know what you're doing. I'll tell you this, not to scare you, real estate agents are one of the most sued careers next to doctors. Because you're helping people invest hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. If you mess up, it typically costs people a lot of moolah. And they're coming after you. Now, rest assured, when you join a firm, you have what's called errors and omissions insurance, right? E&O. So you have an insurance policy that helps you if you screw up. The deductible sucks, but at least that's there, right? So as opposed to spending $100,000 out of pocket, you may just walk away with $5,000. So, food for thought. Best course of action is don't mess up, though. Try to focus on that one. So reasonable skill can, mean a couple different things. You got to know what you're doing. Folks, if you have no experience in commercial brokerage and somebody wanted you to help them, buy a multi-million-dollar, shopping center, you probably shouldn't do it, okay? It's not going to go well. You can't really be guessing on these things. You got to have expertise before you tackle it like that. So you've got to know what you're doing. That is reasonable skill and care. If you practice in any areas where you do not have adequate and accurate knowledge, you could be guilty of not having reasonable skill and care and endangering your client. Okay, breach of your fiduciary duty. So, gots to know what you're doing. This is just some other further examples going into this. Principal or client has a right to rely on their agent or broker firm to provide a reasonable estimate of the market value of the property. They deserve our knowledge and opinion about fair pricing. That goes back to that CMA. Making sure that we're honest about our clients, about the real value of the property. Never make an offer to purchase one of your own listings without being very clear to the seller about the true value of the property. We'll talk about this a little bit later. Folks, some of you are getting your license for different reasons. Some of you want a career in real estate. Some of you may be thinking that it'll be good for like real estate investing. The interesting thing is, once you become a real estate broker, a licensee, you always wear the licensee hat. So while Joe Schmo buying investment properties has no obligation to the sellers, licensees do. Let me tell you something really quick. The Real Estate Commission, which is the entity that gives you a license once you meet the criteria, exists for the sole purpose in protecting the public in real estate transactions. Who do you think they're protecting the public from? Yeah, there you go. Brokers, licensees, you people. What do you mean, you people? I feel discriminated against. Right? Me too. Me people, right? Agents, licensees. If you were to try to take advantage of the public, you're in trouble. Okay? Self-dealing is a no-no in real estate world. In North Carolina, anyway. You cannot try to take advantage of a seller that doesn't know their home value and say, "Oh, I'll buy it from you from blah, 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 blah." Right? Can't do that. You can purchase properties if you give them full and written disclosure and an opportunity to find another agent, but it's always requiring full and written disclosure of actual pricing and things of that nature. So, got to be very careful. I told you, their needs, wants, and desires come before our own.
So say if we like the property, like if there is a seller and if they list some property and as a licensee, if we like that property, so can we buy it at a fair price or can we not?
Yeah, here's the general rule of thumb, and this isn't necessarily testable for the sake of this class, it's kind of too advanced, but let's say that you've done an accurate CMA and you've determined that a realistic sales price for the property is $400,000. If you wanted to negotiate an amount, anything less than that, or you would have to tell them, hey, listen, I could list it on the market and probably get you somewhere around $400,000. However, for convenience, I could buy it from you for this amount. You have to give full and written disclosure that is honest and accurate of what they could get for it. And they would have to acknowledge that you're trying to buy it for less. The other thing, Sandeep, is you have to give them the opportunity to terminate your agency relationship and hire another broker to give them an opinion in facilitating the deal. If you don't give them those, you can be in big trouble. So you have to give them written disclosure of all the facts and the opportunity to hire a different agent and terminate your relationship with them in order to buy it.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. This is advice principles to clients about offers and how they should respond to them. That's true. Okay, when we're dealing with being an agent, we're advisors, is what we are working with buyers and sellers. We're trying to give them advice. I told you they're the boss, but we advise them on what they should probably do. But they're the decision makers. So when an offer comes in, we tell them the good, the bad, the ugly, and let them make a decision. So old car, right? We just knocked that out. Obedience, loyalty, disclosure, confidentiality, accounting, reasonable skill, and care. This is what we owe clients. This is what we owe principals. We do not owe these things to customers. Customers get honesty and fairness and disclosure of material facts because we owe disclosure of material facts to all people. So one of the biggest things, and I've already kind of alluded to this, one of the biggest things in any test question is figuring out where the loyalties lie. And that's where you've got to look for those telltale words, right? Every single test question, you need to ask yourself if they are working with a customer or if they're working for a client. Because assisting a customer means you owe them honesty, fairness, and material facts only. But working for a client means you owe them all of old car, all of those fiduciary duties.
So you wouldn't consider the property value a material fact, correct?
Property value would be a material fact.
But if they're a customer, you don't owe that to them in that case.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Here's the thing, just to go down that rabbit hole. When we're dealing with a CMA, a comparative market analysis, is where we take previous sales and we make adjustments to help our clients determine what a reasonable sales price or reasonable purchase price is. We would not do a CMA for a customer, but what we would, if they asked us to, we would provide a customer with a list of unadjusted comps. We could say, here's some homes similar that have sold in the area. We can give them those. We don't owe them like a full adjusted opinion of value or an opinion of sales price, but we would, if they asked us, be required to tell them, here are some other homes that are similar that sold. Yeah, good question. So let's get into, in this last little hour we got, get into the next piece of this agency. Okay, agency disclosures, special rules with them, how they kind of flow. Before I do that, let me just stop for a second. How are we feeling? Y'all doing all right so far, everybody? Nobody's having an existential crisis yet? I like it. Here's the thing, I ain't no fool. After like all the squirrely questions that my last class had, I changed my approach completely from the last grouping to this to y'all. I'm like, I'm not gonna even open the door for some of those conversations because they did every time they just give them an inch and they take a mile. And they're like, but what if, but this, but that, and I'm like, it's not on the test, right? Sometimes I have to just do that because they folks, you need to know what's on the test. I could talk all day, everything real estate, but if it's not on your test, I don't want to focus on it. It's just going to confuse you. Yeah, I do that a lot. Picks up the microphone and whispers. If you watch Travis's videos, Travis is a yeller. And sometimes I get like super enthusiastic and I'll like, do stuff. But I find that I just like to make things awkward because it helps you remember them. So I'll just pick up the phone and I'll whisper things to you. Because then you have a tendency to remember those too. So it's just as effective as Travis is yelling. It just saves my voice a little bit more. So just make it a little awkward with the whisper. It happens. So let's talk about this. ASMR. Just whispering real estate, right? Right into the microphone. Can you imagine like a whole like real estate channel just teaching you agency, whispering into the microphone? Yeah, whispering, yeah, you're right. It's weird, right? Like if you're not expecting whispering, it's like weird, and so it gets your attention. You're like, why is he whispering? What is he doing? Folks, there's a method to my madness. There's certain ways that I do things and say things and teach things because you'll remember them because it was weird, right? I talk about crystal meth all the time. You know why? Because that's such a weird concept. I'm like, why the hell does he keep talking about crystal meth? Because you're going to remember crystal meth. That's why. You'll remember it. And you'll know what I'm talking about when we get into the contracts. I like to bring crystal meth back around for them. So, when we're dealing with disclosures, there's a lot of different disclosures that we need to talk about, okay? There's disclosure of customer confidential information that we have to give to clients. There's disclosure on agency. There's disclosures of material facts, okay? A lot of different disclosures that have to happen. So you got to pay attention to what type of disclosure we're talking about. So if we're dealing with disclosures, we could be talking about disclosure of information from licensees to clients. We could be dealing with disclosure of information from sellers to buyers. We could be dealing with disclosure of information from licensees to customers. And all of these work a little bit differently. There's different disclosures. There's different things that we need to touch on depending on the parties. Folks, focus on the middle one for a second. Disclosure of information from sellers to buyers. Is there a real estate professional in there? There's not. So you got to pay attention, right? Because things change depending on who we're talking about. And let me go ahead and give you the most prevalent example of that. I told you that we as licensees in North Carolina always have to disclose material facts. You know who doesn't? Sellers. In North Carolina, we are what's called a doctrine of caveat emptor state, which means let the buyer beware. And here's what that means. If we're dealing with a discussion between sellers and buyers, the seller does not have to tell the buyer anything about what's wrong with their property. Nothing. If the seller knows their roof leaks, they don't have to tell you. If a seller knows they have foundation issues, they don't have to tell you. If a seller knows that there's a pit to hell in their basement and they play cards with the devil every Sunday night, they don't have to tell you.
Do they have to tell you if you ask?
No.
Oh, okay.
But agents, licensees, always have to disclose everything. So if your seller tells you, their agent, about the leaky roof, the foundation issues, and the pit to hell in the basement, you've got to sing like a bird to everybody.
But wouldn't that also mean that, like, as the agent to your client, you would tell them we need to get other people that help you sell houses, like foundation people and all the other people that will look at a roof, to look at the roof?
Yeah, and this is one of the big reasons, Sheena, why we have home inspections, right? Home inspections are oh so important because when we get into material facts, the general rule of thumb is real estate licensees are responsible for disclosing all material facts that are known or what we say reasonably should have been known. But there's no expectation for us to climb on the roof. And so what we would do is we would recommend home inspections and investigations and things of that nature. You're absolutely right. Claire, did you have something?
Yeah, so when you're listing your house and fill out, I think it's a disclosure form.
Yep, the RPODs.
Yeah, you legally don't, if I know my roof leaks and I'm trying to list my house and I don't want to tell my listing agent, I legally don't have to. Or, I mean, I guess you just
here's the rule of thumb. As a seller, you can't lie, can't commit fraud, and you can't try to hide it and cover it up because you could be guilty of fraud. But you do not have to tell them. Basically, when you look at the RPODs, which is the Residential Property and Owners Association Disclosure Statement, we love acronyms in real estate, so we call it the RPODs because boy howdy, that other one's a mouthful. The seller's options for answering any question about defects or issues of the property are yes, no, or no representation. I told y'all I was full of Dave Chappelle references. You remember back in that, the Dave Chappelle? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Plead the fifth. Right? Pleading the fifth. Ain't going to tell you nothing. That's what pleading the fifth means. No self-incrimination. So they can plead the fifth. Say, I'm not telling you nothing. You figure it out. So they know their roof leaks and they check the no box. That's fraud. They're lying. They're in trouble. But if they know their roof leaks and they plead the fifth, can't touch them with a 10-foot pole.
But as a buyer or a potential buyer, and I see that disclosure and I see that they didn't check yes or no, they put the
No rep.
representation, you know, okay, there's something going on with the roof.
Not necessarily. Yeah, I mean, you're right. It would be a red flag to me, right? I'd be like, okay, why do they say no rep versus no, right? Like, I'm going to, probably have some investigation done because I'm going to assume. But, there are times where people actually just say, I don't know, and they put no rep, right? That doesn't necessarily mean there's an issue. We're going to talk about that more in just a second. We're going to look at that disclosure. So the disclosure rules kind of change depending on who we're talking about. Heather says, the seller of my house put no rep on everything. That is rare, but it does happen. It's more common for flips. It's more common for properties where the owner hasn't lived in them because they don't know and they don't want to be like guilty of anything, or there's it does happen though. Was there do you know, is there a reason why, Heather? Could you ascertain there was a reason?
So she said it was like that her ex-husband had taken care of all this stuff. So she didn't know. She had just gone through a divorce, and so it was her. I feel like that's not true, but it was her way of getting away from having to answer the questions about the roof that needed to be replaced.
Oh, so the roof did need to be replaced.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Did you find it in an inspection?
No. A lot of things should have been found in the inspection were not, but I feel like that was her just get out of Dodge.
Yeah. Well, and she didn't even have to have an excuse. I mean, she legally had the right to say no representation the whole way down, no matter what her reason was, right? That's the state of North Carolina, where doctrine of caveat emptor state. So there's a perfect example. She didn't want to tell you nothing. She didn't tell you nothing, and it was up to you to find it. And if you didn't find it, tough cookies, right? That's how it works.
I'm assuming, Heather, you didn't have any contingencies.
We did, and she did. We met. We had to meet in the middle on some stuff, and it all worked out. But I'm happy with my house. But could it have been better? Yes.
Sure, right? No.
It is what it is.
That's right. Sometimes it is what it is, right? C'est la vie. So, when we're dealing with disclosures, here's the thing that I'm going to tell you. I hate to be the bearer of bad news here. I can make you an expert on property disclosures in North Carolina. But if you get any disclosure questions on the national portion of the test, I can't really help you much. And I'll tell you why. I don't know what the hell kind of questions they would ask on a national level, because every state's disclosure laws are different. So it's honestly bordering on cruel if they put any disclosure questions on the national test. And let me give you a random piece of information, okay? I have such a thirst for knowledge as a real estate broker and am interested in getting licensed in other states. And so I recently took the Colorado licensing exam to get my license in Colorado. And it's separated out just like North Carolina. There is a national portion and then there's a Colorado state portion. Well, boy, howdy, is Colorado different than North Carolina. Whew, I didn't study nothing. But I did pass it, barely. But on the national side, I absolutely killed it. But I'll tell you what, there were some disclosure questions that I thought were kind of weird. Because I'm like, disclosure is so state specific. I don't know how they could put any disclosure questions on the national side. So I'm hoping North Carolina is not that mean to you. I don't get to see the test. Travis doesn't get to see the North Carolina test, right? They have that thing under lock and key. But I would just treat it very similarly to the North Carolina if you get a national test question. The RPODs, the MOG will never be discussed. The disclosure forms that we're about to talk about, you definitely won't see those on the national. But in regards to disclosure, I would just kind of go with the general rule of thumb of disclosed material facts. Does that make sense? If you see it on the national side, I wish I could give you more information than that, but that's the best I got, at least in that realm, right? So in North Carolina, we have what we call the Residential Property Disclosure Act. The Residential Property Disclosure Act. Well, I already told you, we are a state that has what we call the Doctrine of Caveat Emptor, which stands for, means, let the buyer beware. And that's where I told you, when we're dealing with disclosure between seller and buyer, the seller doesn't have to tell the buyer anything. Nothing. Nada. They just can't hide stuff and they can't commit fraud. Well, in order to kind of combat the Doctrine of Caveat Emptor in North Carolina, as opposed to just getting rid of it, I don't know why we didn't do that, but in order to combat it, we created the Residential Property Disclosure Act, which is part of North Carolina General Assembly legislation. It's part of the general statutes. It says, in circumstances where you're selling a resale residential home under most circumstances, a special form is required. And that form was that mouthful that I just talked about. The Residential Property and Owners Association Disclosure Statement. And so understand that the form is mandatory in most transactions, but disclosure is not. When you look at that form, they have the option of no representation the whole way down. Just pull this up on Learn Test Pass real quick and I'll show you. Residential Property and Owners Association Disclosure Statement. RPODs, right? Mouthful. And so it goes on talking about the Disclosure Act, the Residential Property Disclosure Act under General Statute 47E. And understand that this form is required in the state of North Carolina. Oh, folks, we've got Travis hanging out in here with us. I heard a ding and I'm like, who just came in magically? Who has that kind of power and permission? It's Travis.
She had to let me in just like everybody else.
Oh, did she?
I didn't barge in. No, she just let
I didn't even notice you like come in. I just heard the ding.
You can blame Becky, not me.
Oh, that's Becky's fault then. Yeah, there you go, Travis. Oh.
It usually is Becky's fault.
It is typically Becky's fault. That's fine. That's cool.
It actually is. She actually sent, you know what it is? She sent me an email. She said, "Oh my God, you've got to get in here. This is the worst class we've ever had, and Seth needs help."
I was panicking, was losing my mind. I cried a couple times.
Over the top. They're already like having a heart attack. That's what she said. Y'all look fine to me. I don't know why she said all that.
I tell you what, Travis, it's the exact opposite. I was joking with these folks, man. I just explain listing and selling and agency, and I mean they picked it up faster than any class I've ever seen pick it up, because after my last class they went down some rabbit holes, so I approached it differently, and these folks are brilliant. They got it.
God, if they picked up listing and selling, then you need to frame them and keep them.
That's exactly right. I mean, they just like ninjas. They got it. I mean, my last class went on a 2-hour tangent, and I just had to beg and plead them to like just listen to me. Yeah.
Did you have to scream at them though?
No, I told them that was your job. I told them
That takes all the fun out.
I just awkwardly whisper into the microphone and just make them feel weird about it.
That's even worse.
Exactly.
That's far. Hi folks, how are y'all?
Hello, how are you?
How are you?
I just thought I'd stop in and say hello. See how y'all are. Welcome you to class.
Y'all blink twice if you need help. This is your only opportunity to tell Travis, right? I mean,
Clearly you need help. Day one, he's making you do work. I thought day one was supposed to be like a party and you have margaritas and you just chill out.
that's what we were
know
hoping
each
for.
other and-
That's right. Didn't work out. I'm mean like that.
Yeah, that sounds about right for you.
Yeah.
Sounds about right.
Mean and
So,
nasty.
I'm glad to see y'all are well into the material because I tell you something, this class waits for nobody. And I'm sure Seth and Becky have both explained that to you. I always tell my students on day one that this is probably going to be the hardest thing you'll ever do. Educationally, it's probably the most difficult thing you'll ever do. And that really, I think, shocks people. I think they laugh it off. I think, they think, I've done, I've
Med school and yeah.
Yay, I've got a master's degree, I've got a doctoral degree. I don't care what you got. I really don't. The amount of material that we expect people to grasp and sort of distill down in the short amount of time that we do, it is second to none as far as challenge goes. And I don't say any of that to discourage you. I say that to give you the best possible chance at success, because if you will start from day one with this approach of, this is going to kick my ass. There is no way around it. The only question is, do I kick back? And so don't allow yourself to fall into, a very easy trap of thinking, it's the first week of class, I feel pretty good. I understood everything we talked about. You really don't understand everything you talked about, even when you think you do, because I will tell you from experience, and I've been doing this a long time, I still learn things about agencies from time to time. I mean, there's still those like aha moments that I have when I'm in the middle of explaining something, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's a weird, unique way to think about that. So it's okay, especially for this first topic, to be something that you feel like, no matter how many times I go through it, I feel like it gets more and more complex, because that's very true. That means you're learning it. That really does. If you think agency's simple, you probably don't understand it yet. I think is the moral to that story. It is tough, and that's why we have it first, because we find that you need to engage with it more than anything else throughout the class. And so if we can take agency and sort of tie everything back to it, once you know what a client is, now we can talk about, when we talk about contracts, what advice would you give your client about this contract versus what would you say to a customer about that contract? So we try to constantly tie everything back to agency, because after all, that's kind of the name of the game. That's why you're getting the license. Well, you get a license to make money.
Yeah,
but,
that's right.
the name of the game and how you make money in this business is representing people. I like Becky's like, customer is not your person, client is your person. Even though I will tell you this, truthfully, customers in this business are sometimes like gold. It just doesn't mean we look out for their best interest. If a cynical person, and I'm never been accused of that, would say client is somebody you protect from being taken advantage of, and customer is someone you take advantage of. I mean, that would be the cynical way to look at agency. I mean, I would never say anything like that. Now, I wouldn't say that would be helpful at all to think of, yes, that's a way to think of clients and customers. Really, it is. I know we'd love to tell ourselves that we love everybody and we're going to protect everybody, but you can't do that in this business. As Becky put in the chat, you got your person and you got not your person. And if you're not my person, then more power to you. I hope the Lord has mercy on your soul. That's the way I have to approach it. I'll be nice to you. As a matter of fact, I'll be doubly nice to a customer, because what am I trying to unload a customer of at any given time on behalf of my client? Not
Money.
My own personal interest. Money. I mean, think of it. Every time you're labeled a customer in your life, isn't the person on the other side of that transaction trying to empty your wallet from you? Isn't that exactly what they're doing? If you go to Best Buy, we love our customers. Of course they do, because they're taking all your money. The old expression, the customer's always right. Nobody actually believes that, but we say it
Because we want their
so we
money.
take their money.
That's right.
Right? And so one of the cynical way, again, I get it, it's cynical that I think about that difference is my client is the person who I'm working and striving to help in every possible way get the best possible outcome. The customer is somebody that's almost like a target. That they're the ones that we have to go through in order to accomplish the goals of my client. You got to have both. You can't get through this business with just one. I've had people say, well, I only want clients. No, you don't. How you going to do it? If my client's the seller, folks, don't I need a buyer on the other side to make the deal happen? There's got to be a customer somewhere. Always. The only question is that person my client or is that person my customer? So agency it's a fun topic. I'm sure Seth is making it fun and interesting because I know Seth, and you're super lucky to have these two. Don't take that for granted. The things that Becky does as far as like compiling stuff for you and sending it to you, I can honestly say this, and it's not because it's my school, it's because I wholeheartedly believe it. You have more resources to tackle this and better designed resources to tackle this than any other 10 places combined. And I mean that. And the numbers speak for themselves. And that's not all me. That is because we have a whole slew of people working behind the scenes who have created incredible resources for you folks. Take advantage of them. And don't go out and feel like you need to buy a bunch of other stuff. Listen, you can spend all the money you want to spend, but if you get on these online things and you'll see, oh, I bought Prep Agent and I bought CompuCram and I bought this and I bought that. And here's what I would challenge you to. When you read all that, ask that person who's given a glowing response, ask them this simple question. Did you take the class with Trav Talks? And you know what universally the answer will be? No. And that's why they needed CompuCram, and that's why they needed Prep Agent, because they took it at a shitty school, and I shouldn't say that out loud, in the first place. And they needed all that extra stuff. Y'all don't need all that. You got it all, baby. I mean, you really do. But you got to use it. You will not learn by osmosis. Nobody does. And so, I hate to jump in and get on my soapbox on the first day, but I did want to say hello, and I'm sure they've told you much the same things. I just like to reaffirm that for folks when they first get in, and engage with us, engage with Seth, and engage with Becky, engage with me. If you have questions at 3 o'clock in the morning, that doesn't mean we're going to answer them at 3 o'clock in the morning, but send them, because when we wake up and we see them, we will answer. And we want to hear those questions. We want to know where your brain is. We want to know where your struggles are, because we're on this ride with you. I do this with thousands of students every year at this point, and I genuinely feel a personal connection to every single one of them. And you'll be amazed how close you'll get through Zoom. I think people take for granted, oh, it's Zoom, I'm not going to get to know the people in my class. Yes, you will. You will. And this will be your little family for the next, 7 weeks?
I don't know, 8,000 hours or something like that?
Something like that.
Yeah.
Some astronomical number. By the way, we don't charge anything extra for the extra hours. If you do the math.
That's right.
If you do the math, we're way over the minimum number of hours because we don't believe it can be taught in 75 hours. It can be like chugged through in 75 hours, but to actually get in the weeds and teach it the way it needs to be taught, we don't believe in that. And so we teach it on a longer schedule because we think that's important. Anyway, I'm here. It's pretty easy to find me. It's Travis at travtalks.com. And if Seth is torturing you, please let me know, because he gets a bonus for every one of those emails I get. So I can take care of it. Thank you so much for taking the class with us. Genuinely, we appreciate it. We're obviously here to make money, but we're here because this is our passion. I love real estate. I'm a good real estate broker, but I'm a great real estate instructor. And I think Seth probably feels that exact same way about himself.
Yep.
And we tend to attract people to our little family who value teaching this more so than a side job. This is not our side job. For us, the selling is the side job. Because we value this. We love that moment of helping people connect and helping you launch your career. And the last thing I'll say about that is, whatever struggles you got to put yourself through to get through this, it is so very much worth it. You all came here, I'm assuming, because you wanted to change your path. I mean, sometimes there may be people who take the class just because they want the knowledge, and that's wonderful. But I think the vast majority of us take this class because they want to change their life. I know that was my case 20 years ago when I took the class. That was the case for me. And I took it at night when I was still working a full-time job, and I'm sure a lot of you all are doing that. And that's great, and we appreciate that commitment. Make sure that commitment lasts all week long. If you only focus on this on Saturdays and Sundays, you won't be successful. You just won't. And that means you're going to make sacrifices big time for the next 7 weeks. But it will be worth it. I mean, because it allows you the freedom to do things. Like I was joking with Seth the other day, and I'm not trying to share his business, but he's going to have to deal with it because that's the way I am. I was joking with him the other day. I said, how many times are you taking your kids to Disney World this year? Every time I look, you're in Disney World. Like, it's like the 12th time, and it's just February already. You know, this business, folks, gives you the freedom to do those things. So it's worth the sacrifice. Because I've had people say, oh, my kids are my number one priority. If that was true, then you'd ignore them for the next 8 weeks. And that's the honest to God's truth right there. If your kids really are your priority and giving them a better life is your priority, then they will survive the next 8 weeks. Even if you have to just put dog food on the floor and water, they will survive over the next 8 weeks. Because it's the rest of their life that you're making better by being here, right? And that means short-term sacrifice, no matter how you do it. You know, I cannot point to the number of people that have come through this and it's completely changed their life. I work with them every single day. Leslie, who you'll meet at some point in time, she was a pre-licensing student of mine a lot more years ago than she would want to say right now. But the first time I met her, she had SpaghettiOs in her hair. She came to take a night class, and she introduced herself, and I said, you have spaghetti in your hair. And she had been home because she had a 1-year-old. And Natalie had just started eating solid food, and she'd given her spaghetti, and she had raced home, fed the baby, come back to take a night class. And I remember on a break, one of the first few classes, we were talking about why people were there. What was their why? Why were they taking the class? And she gave me the best answer still to this day I've ever heard that question. She said, I want to make more money than my husband so I can tell him to shut the hell up. That was her answer to that question. And I still love that answer even to this day. So the next time when you meet Leslie, I want you to ask her something. Ask her how long ago Justin had to shut up, and she'll be like, a long time ago. Because it was probably 10 years ago that she lapped the field a couple of times over on Justin. And so now he is perfectly happy to have a sugar mama, and he will tell you that in his life. But you take somebody who comes to the class and they're racing home to feed a 1-year-old, and they're a newly married couple, and they're barely getting by, and they're living in a single wide trailer, to somebody who now makes $150,000 a year. And has all the freedom to do everything they ever wanted to do, and all of it was unlocked with this little course. So don't tell me it's not worth it. It's worth all of it and then some. And don't forget that. That part is important. It really is, because you are going to need that. You're going to need to feed off of that. Whatever that motivation is, whether it's monetary, whether it's having more time with your family, whether it's whatever, just freedom from not having a job, being your own boss, find that motivation and go back to that well, because you're going to need it. Because there are going to be times you go home and you're like, I sat in class for 2 days straight. I cannot study tonight. And you're like, no, I have to. I've got to. I don't have a choice. So, make sure you keep that fire about it. And make sure as you have struggles or celebrations, you let us know along the way so we can be there for you and keep you headed in the right direction, because you've made a major commitment to us, and that means we make a major commitment to you. That's kind of all I got for you. Anybody have any questions?
Very wise words.
No, y'all are quiet. Oh, super quiet.
Chrissy
Y'all so
says thank
quiet.
you.
They got y'all on like perma mute or something?
Oh, I told them they're not allowed to talk to me. They're not. No.
Oh,
Yeah.
they can't talk.
No.
You can't talk.
No. They know they can talk. What you got, Monica?
Oh, I was just gonna say I'm tired.
You tired?
Tired.
Tired. That's why you're quiet.
Be tired
Yeah.
yourself too. I
Yeah.
know.
Right. They've been with me for almost 8 hours today. Those poor saps, right?
So here's one thing I'm gonna leave you with. Whenever you need to think of like why you're doing this, at least for some of you, you can just think of this in the back of your head.
Where the money resides.
Because you're going where the money resides, baby. This business is where the money resides. And it always has been, and it always will be, and that ain't changing anytime soon. I tell people all the time, there are not a lot of things that you can do where you learn it in 6 weeks and you make a couple $100,000 a year doing it, at least legally. There's some things you can do making that kind of money, but they fall sort of on the illegal side of things.
Sure.
This one is very much legal, and that's a good thing. And that's a good thing. Doesn't mean it's an easy job. It is not. It is a challenge. It's a challenge to get into it. It's a challenge to do it well. But the rewards are tremendous. They really are. And not just in money, but in people too. Because you build such wonderful relationships with people in this business. Unless you don't like people, in which case you don't have to build relationships with them. You know, it takes all kinds. Somebody asked me that question too. They pulled me aside one time and said, you know, I'm kind of worried. I really don't like people all that much. I said, here's the thing. The good news is there are people who don't like people that have to buy houses too. And so those are your people. Those are the ones that you want for a client. No matter what your personality is, that same person exists out there and they need to buy a house. And you just got to find your people. That's all. See, like I can't deal with the accountants of the world. That's a no for me. The people, and I love you, but if you're that person that's got to read everything on the menu before you can decide what you want to eat, you ain't my people. You can't be my client. We ain't gonna get along because I'm at some point about the 18th house in a row. I'm gonna pick one, pick it now. Yeah, and that's not a good place, right, for agent client to be. So you learn. You're gonna find your people, and that's where you'll be happy, and that's where you make a lot of money.
That's right.
Anyhow, I'm gonna leave y'all alone now.
Hold on, Travis. I didn't get an update. How's the floors going?
Well, we have a floor. We have one. We have subfloors anyway.
Oh, the subfloor's already back in?
Yeah, the subfloor's back in. Yeah, they got the damage repaired in the crawl space, and the subfloors are back in, so we no longer have a hole in the house. They're coming back next week to excavate the outside of the crawl space and figure out and fix what created the problem in the first place. But at least now we do have a floor. But we're waiting for the flooring to be able to finish the interior portion of the thing, and that might be another couple weeks or so.
Did any of your joists have to be replaced?
Oh yeah, all the joists on that
That's
side.
what I thought. From that picture you sent, it looked like it. Yep.
Yeah, they cut out all the joists on that side of the room, and new vapor barrier, tarred and sealed the foundation wall. We had a little water intrusion issue around here, aka Travis sat his fat ass on the sofa and the sofa went through the floor. So that was the water intrusion issue. Joys of owning an old house. We did not realize we had some wood rot going on over there. And I was rudely pointed out to it.
Yeah.
I thought I broke the leg of the sofa. No, I broke the leg of the sofa through the floor. Here's your hint that you're going to diet.
Yeah. We found out, I was actually had the pleasure of teaching a BICUP class with Travis and Leslie a couple days ago because Travis was dealing with that. So we got pictures while the contractors were there and everything, but I didn't get the update while we were there, so I figured y'all could hear the story as well.
Exactly. And it is Mr. French's fault. His French drains suck, apparently. So, of course, all we're getting is new French drains, so we hope those are better than the old French.
Sure.
And you got to love a contractor. Here's what I said to him. How do we know this is not going to happen again? He said, well, you don't. I said, it's not reassuring. He said, well, here's the thing. I estimate it probably took about 40 years for this problem to kind of develop. I said, uh-huh. He said, you planning to own this for 40 more years? I said, probably not. He said, then good. It'll be the next person to have to deal with it. I'm like, that's a hell of an outlook you got on this whole situation right here.
No kidding. Such an optimist that the contractor is.
It's such a great, thing, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Very matter of fact. He's,
Nothing screams quality craftsmanship like it'll hold up until you're dead, and then you don't have to worry about it anymore.
That's just like the 5-year warranties on cars, right? Like that, they last just long enough for the engine to fail right after it.
That's right.
That's it.
What do they call that? Planned obsolescence, I guess.
That's it.
Y'all have a wonderful rest of your afternoon. I'm going to get out of your hair. I'm over here writing exam questions. I'm going to go back to doing that. But I did want to stop and say hello. It's nice to meet y'all.
Good deal. Always good to see you, sir. We appreciate the words of wisdom.
Yep.
Nice to meet you.
You as well, Sherry.
Thank you.
Yep, Lawrence. See you later.
I don't think he knows that him walking into a room or popping in on a Zoom room is sometimes kind of the equivalent of Channing Tatum walking into your coffee bar or Keanu Reeves sitting next to you on a subway. I have seen people get just almost
Starstruck when Travis pops in.
YouTube and
Right.
things, and they're just like, that's Travis Everett.
Yeah, y'all watch his videos, right? And so there he is. So, yep. Yeah, for me, Travis is just a good friend. I never watched his videos, and being another instructor, but I love his content, so even before I taught for his school and I taught for other schools, I did the same thing. That's what I told my students. I said, because I didn't have videos back then. I wasn't recording myself. I wasn't posting it. And I said, listen, there's only one instructor that I'm okay with you watching their stuff, and it's Travis, because he knows what he's talking about. There's a lot of videos out there, and not all of it's good information, but we have a good organization here. Travis is top notch, and like-minded people have just all pulled together. So you'll never meet a bad person in our organization. They're all really the best of the best, and we really do love what we do. So I'm glad Travis was able to come in and reinforce all the things that y'all have heard thus far about clients versus customers, and the amount of motivation that you need to get through this, and the rewards that you'll get if you persevere. So hopefully we're all still feeling very good about it. Like I said, it's nice of Travis to come in and get y'all out of learning for 20 minutes, right? Give y'all a little bit of a break, so that's nice. That's nice of him. Tell you what, folks, let me do this before I forget. I'm going to put my email in chat, even though you've already got it, but I want to make sure that you have it. And for two reasons. If you look through your emails, you may have two different emails because we do have two Seths in our organization. My email address is sethchauncey@travtalks.com. The other Seth is just seth@travtalks.com. So if you email the other Seth a question, he's just going to forward it to me. So make sure you just send it to me, because then I can just answer you. The other Seth will just forward it and be like, yeah, different Seth. So sethchauncey@travtalks.com is mine. Also, I'm going to put my cell phone number in the chat. And remember, this is my real cell phone number. If you've got questions, you can text me, because I'm typically faster at the text. But Google Classroom is also a good place. I try to keep an eye on that, and then that way, if I answer a question, it may help some of your peers as well. Because if you have the question, other people may also have the question. But if it's something very one-offy and very quick, you can text me. However you want to get in touch with me is fine. And then you heard Travis. Y'all can reach out to just about anybody in our organization. The only reason I don't want you to pick on poor other Seth is because as the student relations director, he probably has 10 billion emails a day of people just asking about their schedule and classes and things of that nature. So he sometimes is a little more abrupt in, I'm not answering your questions, you emailed the wrong Seth. He still loves you. He just gets a little sassy pants sometimes when you email them, because he has way more emails than I do. I'll say that. So that's why you may want to make sure that you email the right Seth if you want an answer. So we'll go with that. Let me talk for another 9 minutes, because what I typically like to do is leave the last 10 minutes open for discussion, right? And so for 9 more minutes, I'm going to talk to you about these disclosures and things of that nature. But when it hits 4 o'clock, I'll kind of switch gears and I'll let you just chat with me about what to expect from the class, anything you want to ask in general, topics we've talked about, things of that nature. So, when we're dealing with disclosures, I told you North Carolina, this is very specific to North Carolina, has the Residential Property Disclosures Act. And the act requires this form in most transactions. So there are some exemptions when this form is not required. So if you look, Residential Property Disclosure Act requires owners of residential, let me zoom out a little bit, residential real estate, single-family homes, individual condominiums, townhouses, and the like, and buildings with up to 4 dwelling units. The reason why it says that is if you get anything bigger than a quadruplex, we consider it a commercial property. Up to 4 units, which is what a quadruplex is, we consider that residential still. But if you're buying a 5-plex or anything bigger, it's considered commercial, so it's exempt if it's commercial. To furnish purchasers a residential property and owners association disclosure statement. This form is the only one approved for this purpose. So it is a requirement. When this is required, a seller has to provide this form. But here's what I'm going to say again. The form is required. Disclosure is not. A disclosure statement must be furnished in connection with the sale, exchange, option, sale and release with option to purchase where the tenant does not occupy or intend to occupy the dwelling. A disclosure statement is not required for some transactions, including the first sale of a dwelling which has never been inhabited. What does that mean? The first sale of a dwelling that has never been inhabited.
New construction.
New construction.
New build.
Yeah, new construction. Folks, I'm going to tell you my other joke for this class. One day, when I get tired of teaching, which will probably be never, I plan to retire and join the CIA. You're like, Seth, the CIA? And here's why. I've gotten so good at reading lips teaching these Zoom classes because every single one of you just mouthed new construction. But I didn't accept it. I just waited there for some of you to unmute, right? And Kelly's laughing her butt off because she knows she was the first one to mouth new construction. And then every single one of you did the same thing, right? And so I've gotten so good at reading lips. You're just sitting there. And so one day, you're going to be somewhere. And you're going to see me at a coffee shop with an earpiece in and a set of binoculars. I'll be looking on a roof somewhere. I'll be like, yeah, the drug deal's happening on Saturday. It's going to be 32 men with rifles. 18,000 pounds of cocaine. Right? And when you see me, you just mind your business because I'm working for the CIA because I've gotten so good at reading lips because all you folks don't unmute and talk to me. So I've had to learn to read the lip. Here's the real funny part about that, though. I'm only good at reading lips because I know what the answer is. I bet you in real life I'm absolutely terrible at it. Right? Can you imagine? Like, I'm like one of those people you like apply for the job and you're like not qualified at all. And so what I'm actually saying is they said the potato salad has the raisins in it and Nana's coming over after work. And they're like, Seth, is that really what they said? Don't question me. I'm the expert here, right? I got something about crows and gummy worms. I'm not really sure what to. Right? They're like, sir, you're fired. I'm like, yeah, I'm just gonna go. So yeah, I been really good at reading lips. It's okay though. I like to pick on you because I know it's hard to hit that little button, that little mouse button or the space bar just beep. So hard. So new construction. Go ahead, Kelly.
I was gonna say, I'm technically helping you with your future CIA. I'm trying to help you build those skills.
Build those skills. I appreciate you.
You know.
Yeah. You know what you really need to do, Kelly, is you need to start saying the wrong answers and seeing if I can catch that, right? Like Kelly's just gonna start saying things like astronauts in space. I'm like, oh my God, what did you just say, right? Trying to read it because when I'm expecting you to say new construction, I can read new construction, but I think I'm probably not as good as I think I am.
I'll work on that.
Yeah. Just start throwing random obscure things, right? And just make a game out of it. See if I can guess it. Bonus points if I do. So new construction is exempt. There's a couple different types of transactions that are exempt from this residential property disclosure in North Carolina. So not required for the first sale of a dwelling or residential property made pursuant with a lease with option to purchase, where the lessee occupies or intends to occupy the dwelling. So in other words, if somebody's already living in the home and then they're purchasing it as like a tenant, a lease with option to purchase, the idea is, folks, why would they need a disclosure saying what's wrong with the property? If they live there, they probably know what's wrong with the property. So that's one of the times that it's exempt. The two biggest exemptions, let's do the four biggest exemptions. New construction, doesn't need the RPODs. Lease with option to purchase where the lessee already occupies the property, doesn't need the RPODs. Foreclosures, don't need this. Transfers between co-owners or court-order transfers, also don't need this. But in most transactions, they are required. Here's the other thing about this. It is required whether or not you utilize a real estate broker. We've already established that people could sell their home without a licensee, right, without a broker. But the residential property disclosure is statewide legislation. So every seller is required under the Residential Property Disclosure Act to provide this when it's required, even if they don't use a broker. And so they answer the questions, right? There's given questions. And so if you come down here and look, questions like, in what year was the dwelling constructed? Is there any problem, malfunction, or defect with the dwelling's foundation, slab, fireplaces and chimneys, floors, windows, including storm windows and screens, doors, ceilings, interior, exterior walls, attached garage, patio, deck, or other structural component, including any modification to them? Whew, that's a doozy of a question, right? And so the answers, the choices are yes, no, and no representation. So this is where I'll remind you, a seller does have to produce this form when it's required. But they have every right to say, I'm not telling you nothing. They can say no rep the whole way down. So if you look at these, if you say yes, there's an issue, you're telling us, admittedly, that there is a defect. And then we would ask you to tell us what that defect is down in a later section. Right here. What you got, Sandeep?
So this disclosure will be given to the seller's agent or a buyer's agent from seller, or whom does the seller give?
Good question. So it is required that a seller fills this out, and then the listing agent would give it to the buyer's agent, and the buyer's agent would give it to the buyer. It is the buyer who needs to get this.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, after the seller fills this out, this needs to be given to the buyer prior to submitting an offer. Prior to submitting an offer. And so understand of the yes, no, no representation. Yes means there is an issue and we want you to tell us about it. No means no, there's no issue to the best of my knowledge. If you check no and you know there's an issue, you're committing fraud. Okay, no does not guarantee that there's no issue. It just means I don't know of an issue. And no representation says, I'm not telling you nothing. You figure it out yourself. Okay, I plead the fifth. Not telling you nothing, fifth. Okay, that's what no representation means. So you can legally do no representation the whole way down as a seller. But the form is still required even if you answer no rep the whole way down. That makes sense for everybody? Now, I'm going to tell you the biggest piece of this, and this is where I'll switch over and we'll pick up on this tomorrow. The biggest piece, though, is what happens if a buyer doesn't get this prior to presenting an offer? Because it is required under this piece of legislation, the Residential Property Disclosure Act. So here's what it says. Note to purchasers, if the owner does not give you a RPODs, by the time you make your offer to purchase the property, you may, under certain conditions, cancel any resulting contract without penalty to you as the purchaser. To cancel the contract, you must personally deliver or mail written notice of your decision to cancel to the owner or owner's agent within 3 calendar days following your receipt of the disclosure statement, or 3 calendar days following the date of the contract, whichever occurs first. However, in no event does this Disclosure Act permit you to cancel a contract after settlement or of the transaction or after you've occupied the property. So let me explain this. There is a concept that we're going to talk about much later when dealing with sales contracts, and I've already mentioned them, due diligence and earnest money. So because of the nature of this Disclosure Act, if you are a buyer that did not receive this and you go under contract, you have a 3-day period to terminate that contract after you've gone under contract, right? To terminate it with no penalties, meaning you'd get your due diligence and earnest money back, which is exceptionally rare. In almost all circumstances in North Carolina, if you terminate a contract as a buyer, you lose your due diligence money and sometimes your earnest money. So this has this special little window where a buyer could potentially terminate and get all monies back because of this Residential Property Disclosure Act. And we're going to reference this and talk about this more when we get into the contract section as well. This is just once again, the foundational discussion of the RPODs. Okay? Last thing I'll say before I let you just talk to me, the other document, there is another document, an amendment that was made to the Residential Property Disclosure Act of North Carolina. And the other document that was added in that amendment is the MOG, the Mineral Oil and Gas Rights Disclosure Statement. And I'll talk more about these tomorrow. So here's the deal. Here's my recommendation, then I'll let you just chit chat with me. When we are dealing with our day-to-day functions, you kind of know what our goal is by looking at this Zoom schedule. So we're into 3.2. We're not finished with it, but we're basically where we need to be. We'll finish 3.2 tomorrow, and the goals for tomorrow are 3.3 and 3.4. And so my recommendation to you is to kind of fiddle through the textbook and the slides and, read some material before class. Then listen to the lecture, and then take the quizzes after. So for example, if you look right here, you could arguably go ahead and take this 3.1 agency quiz tonight because we finished that. So the idea is you want to go through the materials on your own leading up before class. That way you already have some questions in your mind about things you didn't understand. And so you can ask me while I'm giving the lecture. And then after the lecture, that would be the best time to then take the quizzes after we finish the lecture, because then you have everything. That's my recommendation. If you want to work well in advance, you can. Just understand that, there's going to be things that I haven't taught you yet. So you're going to see some things if you work ahead that you don't know yet, which is fine, because you can always retake these things. Yeah, there you go. Becky just said the same thing. You can take this just as many times as you like. That's true. So, what do you want to talk about? 7 minutes left. It's been an excellent first day. I appreciate y'all. I'm telling you, y'all were sharp. The way that y'all have grasped these basic concepts of agency so far, make my heart happy.
Sid, you were saying about due diligence and earnest money, right? So would you be covering those concepts somewhere in the...
Oh, yeah. In copious amounts. Okay. Yeah, they're just down the road when we get into sales contracts.
Yeah, I have no idea on those concepts. So.
Yep. Oh, I'm a teacher. You're going to be a rock star, Sandeep. I promise.
Oh, thank you.
Yep.
I know new builds don't have to give the disclosure statement if we were actually going to purchase the new build, but here's my thing. How were we got out of our contract after 72 hours because they didn't disclose that the whole property was wetlands and we couldn't do anything with it.
So when we get into contract law, contracts have to have what we call mutual assent, which basically translates to a meeting of the minds. If they didn't disclose things that were required under law, that an agent reasonably should have known, and that's something that an agent reasonably should have known, typically they'll let you out of things because you could take them to court and sue them, because the contract is in theory what we call voidable, meaning they didn't disclose things, so you couldn't really have made an accurate and adequate decision. So there are some random circumstances under contract law and because of liability risks that people will let you out of a contract because they failed to disclose stuff. Doesn't have to do with the Residential Property Disclosure Act, though. It has to do with fear of being sued in court. Yep. Good question.
Like you were saying with the North Carolina residential property, the disclosure, you were saying they have the 3-day window after the offer is made?
So the 3 days is 3 days from the effective date of the contract, which we're going to have to talk about effective dates later, but meaning the day we go under contract, 3 days from that date, or 3 days from the date you receive the disclosures, whichever happens first. And it's hard for me to explain that because sometimes you send an offer and it doesn't go under contract for a few days. And so in theory, there's two different time frames that we could be concerned about. And we'll talk more about those in the future when we get into contract law.
Okay.
Yeah, excellent question. What else?
I have a question that I know we'll reach in the future, but I've always been so curious about it. With the market, how it's been, and appraisal gaps, when we sold our previous house, every offer we got had like an appraisal gap contingency. And then when we purchased, our realtor was like, this is not a legal binding. It's not a legal binding thing. but then like our other friends who were purchasing, they did put in an appraisal gap. So is that like a kind of a taboo in real estate, but people do it, or?
So understand that there's two different types of appraisal gap addendas. There's one that is a benefit to the seller and one is a detriment to the seller. So it really depends on which one you're talking about. Are you basically saying that the buyer would pay the difference between the appraisal and what they offered?
Yeah, like if the market's so high, if the appraisal came in low, they would make up the difference.
Yeah, and so your agent's right. They're worthless. All it does is make the seller feel warm and fuzzy, and here's why. If you utilize the standard offer to purchase and contract form 2T, which is a due diligence style contract, regardless of what the appraisal says, regardless of you saying that you will pay the difference, you can still back out for any reason or no reason during your due diligence period. And that's why he said it's worthless, because you could still get out of it and not have to pay it. You would lose your due diligence money, but you don't have to pay the gap. Even if you have one of those, you could just terminate the contract legally or otherwise, with no penalty. Well, due diligence would be the penalty, and loss of earnest money would be the penalty, but that'd be it. And that'll make a lot more sense when we get in the offer to purchase and contract section.
Okay.
Yeah. Good question. What else? I'm just so excited to go do some learn, test, pass, and some studying. Right, I'll tell you what I told my last class, folks. This is a weekend class, okay? And it's a hard son of a gun. So y'all don't get to drink for the next 8 weeks or however long we're hanging out together. You just throw that out. I can still drink. You can't, right? Because you got tests and learning to do. My stuff, if I lose some, I make it up somewhere. But you got lots to do. So you better not be doing anything fun tonight. Don't you let me find out you're going out and celebrating your Saturday evening. Absolutely, Heather. Y'all been a blast and a half. I appreciate y'all. Y'all are a good group. I'm excited. Makes it a lot more pleasurable, when you got some sharp students who know some stuff and feeling good and very attentive. Y'all have been, seriously, one of the best groups I've ever had on day one. So I really appreciate y'all. We're going to have some fun together. Here's the deal. Tomorrow morning, same bat time, same bat channel, okay? We're going to follow the same schedule. We will pick up exactly where we left off mañana.